Hello, my friend. This is Greg Hennett bringing you more Water from the Rock. Today's message is titled, From Best Friend to Better Friend. Psalm 41 records David's grief over the shocking betrayal of his best friend, Ahithophel. Sadly, David recalls his great loss with poignant language. Yea, mine own familiar friend, he says in verse 9. Oh, how close they were. Each was familiar with the other's life, family, faith, and calling. In whom I trusted, verse 9, reveals David confided in Ahithophel, freely and often sharing his deepest personal secrets, sweetest biblical insights, and newly inspired songs, which became psalms. The thought of such a completely trusted friend leaving his side, much less taking sides with Absalom against him in a deadly coup, never once entered David's mind. Yet just this had happened, and David was reeling from the impact of this shocking turn. Who did eat of my bread, verse 9, tells us they shared many a quiet dinner together, discussing matters of faith and of state. Hath lifted up his heel against me, verse 9. This reveals what wounded David so deeply. Ahithophel had taken sides against David to, as it were, lift up his heel to kick or stomp on David when he was down, as callously as if the two had never met, or as if David was a despised Philistine enemy. This idiom, that is, lifting up the heel against another, further implies Ahithophel had been totally deceptive about his defection, never giving David a hint of it till it happened. This punch landed squarely on David's jaw and almost knocked him out of his faith, out of his calling, out of his mind, out of his will to continue living. Almost. Thankfully, God's hand held David up in that desperate hour. Thou holdest me up in mine integrity, verse 12. But this supernatural divine preservation was not automatic. Overcoming grace was imparted to David as he quietly set his heart to not allow Ahithophel's abandonment of integrity to make him abandon his own integrity. So God sustained him when his best friend betrayed him. But that's not all God did. Thou settest me before thy face, verse 12. Or, you have brought me into your presence, the New Living Translation says. When David chose to stay faithful amid the agonizing betrayal of his best friend, lo and behold, he found a new friend, the Lord. As Ahithophel's presence departed David's life, God's presence entered in a distinctly new, more powerful dimension. Suddenly, David was not only sustained, but elevated to an entirely new life in which he daily experienced the sweet, reviving, empowering presence of God as never before. Amazingly, God had turned David's curse into a blessing. And this new blessing and deeper divine fellowship would never be taken from David. This marvelous, mystical, manifest intimacy with God would last forever, as verse 12 says. So let's sum up what has happened to the man of God thus far. David has lost his best friend, but he's found a better one. The friend of friends. The friend who sticks closer than a brother. The consummately loyal friend of John 15, who said to us, Ye are my friends, if you do whatsoever I command you. This friend who, by his intensely faithful nature, is incapable of betrayal. The friend who promised, as the New Testament would later record, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee, Hebrews 13:5. And I am with thee always, Matthew 28:20 in the new KJV. Quote, each and every day until the end of the age, says the International Standard Version. So, God turned David's bitter loss into a sweet gain. Now, as with Job, God personally, sovereignly authorized the evil that touched David's life, but only to use Ahithophel's treachery to drive David closer to him. David already knew the Lord, but this situation drove him closer to God. It forced him to lean harder, linger longer, pray more often, and worship with a more complete surrender. To lead David to be immersed in his divine presence as never before. Paradoxically, David's lowest experience led him to find life's highest good. There he reveled in the fullness of joy and unanticipated pleasures forevermore. David described his remarkable find in Psalm 16. In thy presence is the fullness of joy. At thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore. Verse 11. So, paradoxically, incredibly, yet truly, God turned David's fullness of grief into the fullness of joy. Here is divine medicine for wounded, grieving Christians. Has a good friend turned on you lately? Or perhaps years ago? Was it your best friend, your Ahithophel? One of whom you never had the slightest concern that he or she would walk away from you, much less take sides against you in a terrible conflict? Have you taken a terrible punch or been deeply wounded? Are you reeling? Then this word, my friend, is for you. Misery loves company, so both may soak in self-pity and feel good about feeling so bad. But wounded love also loves company. Good company, godly company, spiritually minded company. So one may heal and recover and rise again to greater things, as David prayed, raise me up, verse 10. So be comforted with this medicine. David knows your pain. This psalm proves that. And David's Lord and Master, Jesus, he knows it too. Judas' betrayal proves that. But beware of self-pity, my friend. It will turn your wound into gangrene, and your difficulty into your demise. Remember, many other faithful disciples of Christ are also experiencing betrayal right now, even if you can't see one fellow suffer at the moment. The temptations of your life are no different from what others experience, says 1 Corinthians 10:13 in the New Living Translation. And God never lets the stress be greater than you can bear if you will just abide very close to Him. Oh, that's the secret, friend. Listen to this again. If you will just abide very close to Him, just as Jesus instructed us in John 15. God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can bear. He will show you a way out so that you can endure. 1 Corinthians 10:13 in the New Living Translation. And if it's any further consolation to you, my friend, I know also what you're dealing with. Over the last 40 years, I've experienced abandonment by my closest friend twice and deep, bitter betrayal once. And each experience was more painful than the one before it. But here is the miracle. Today, I'm not bitter at all about any of these sufferings. I understand my friends' treacheries had a spiritual cause. Sin moved them, and then Satan used them. As Paul said, we wrestle not with flesh and blood, or merely with flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness, or wicked spirits in heavenly places. Ephesians 6, verse 12. And that's not all. Now, I see God's hand in all of it. As Joseph said, they meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Genesis 50, verse 20. Jesus was driving me from one best friend and another to a better friend, the best friend, that is himself. Now, I forgave my former friends and went on with my new friend, and he has never forsaken, disappointed, or turned against me, and I'll tell you, he's had plenty of opportunities to do so. Today, by God's amazing grace, I enjoy the wondrous presence of God on a daily basis. His Spirit's anointing, the sense of His hand coming upon me. Oh, my goodness. The new and living way is new and full of life every morning. Am I boasting? Yes, I am, absolutely. But not on myself, on my friend. On His medicine, not my remedies. On His healing power, not my self-made balms. And I relate this only to encourage you. I want you to take David's inspired advice, as I have. And now's the time. As you look back, the way to reconciliation with your former unfaithful friend, for the moment, may be closed. With iron bars and gates, perhaps. So don't look back when God has providentially closed the door. Look forward. Your new best friend, He awaits. The moment you forgive, move on and begin steadily, positively, hungrily seeking His presence and word, your pain will cease, your wound will close, and your healing will begin. And if you persist in your newly enhanced, ever deeper, ever closer, ever sweeter fellowship with your new friend, you will never feel the old pain again. Ever. You will never even think of your Ahithophel, except when you take time, now thoroughly healed, to pray for him or her, as Job prayed for his friends turned enemies, so that Christ may lead your Ahithophel to the truth, to confession, to forgiveness, and to restoration. And when Job prayed for his friends, God turned his captivity. Job 42, verse 10. I wonder, my friend, what He will do for you when you pray for yours. Well, that's all for today, my friend. For more information about my books, courses, teaching videos, and devotional messages, please visit us at GregHennettMinistries.org and also at Greg Hennett on Facebook. And may Jesus richly bless you. Maranatha, He comes.